com esse mesmo espírito que eu tenho o grande prazer de anunciar um amigo que residia em Washington até recentemente, que há algum tempo já está em Los Angeles, mas que tem uma atividade em todo o país. Ele pode ser considerado hoje o principal ativista pela liberdade de informações ufológicas do governo americano, de todos os Estados Unidos. Talvez no mundo seja a pessoa hoje à frente da maior parte dos movimentos que pede aquilo que nós pedimos no Brasil e conseguimos, a abertura oficial de documentos e informações ufológicas. Ele pede isso ao governo Obama, ele faz atividades de muito respeito e credibilidade nos Estados Unidos. Ele me convidou para fazer uma palestra em Washington sobre a abertura brasileira há uns 3 anos atrás, fui. Depois eu o convidei para vir aqui para falar sobre a abertura americana, ele veio. E aí nós temos trocado informações regularmente. Voltei para Washington com o professor Wilson Pickler, agora em maio desse ano, levando a delegação sul-americana para um evento que durou uma semana, que foi a atenção do mundo ufológico, que foi as audiências públicas sobre a abertura, que aconteceram no Clube Nacional da Imprensa, a apenas 2 quarteirões da Casa Branca, onde nós pedimos, ufólogos do mundo inteiro, a abertura dos arquivos ufológicos em nível global, que é mais ou menos o que nós estamos fazendo aqui com a nossa Carta de Foz do Iguaçu para a ONU. Esse cidadão chama-se Stephen Bassett. Por favor, Stephen.
Obrigado, AJ. Yes. Senhoras e senhores, boa noite. That's all my Portuguese. Whether it's always obvious, this entire presentation, in one way or another, deals with truth, reconciliation, and redemption. For the last 7,000 years, the kings and monarchs, emperors, priests and popes, tyrants, dictators, and even the odd elected official have ruled by Machiavellian modalities, 2 of the most important being secrecy and lies. But that's not going to work anymore. And if they continue to push that paradigm into the 21st century, things will get very, very nasty. And 2 reasons why it's not going to work anymore are, 1, this, the second greatest invention in human history. How many of you have one of these? Yeah. And the second reason is the most important invention in human history, the World Wide Web, WWW, which courses through this room right now, and through this hotel, and through the city of Iguazu, and Sao Paulo, and Washington, and Moscow, and Bangladesh. It is the World Wide Web. And because of these 2 inventions, the citizens of the realm have more power to deal with the kings and monarchs, emperors, tyrants, dictators, priests, and popes than any of the citizens at any time, particularly to deal with the matter of lies and secrecy. And in its own way, this presentation and everything else that I do, and many of my colleagues do, is to make it possible for those who still rule to to help us make the 21st century work and go well. On the other hand, if things do not change, the 21st century is not going to go well. Some of you are doing well right now, that's fine. But long term, not so fine. But I'm not going to dwell on that. But I will say this, the three things that will have to happen at the highest levels soon are truth, reconciliation, and redemption. And you can apply them to whoever you wish in the appropriate manner, but you will find that they apply. We're going to begin by a short video. On January 17th of 1961, Dwight D. Eisenhower, 14 years, little under 14 years after the crash of an extraterrestrial vehicle at Roswell, New Mexico, or near Roswell, New Mexico, and one or two other crashes. Dwight David Eisenhower, who I can assure you was fully informed of the ET reality, the crashes, the bodies, the technology, everything, well, to an extent, most of what was going on, though he was kept out, we think, of some things, even though he was, of course, General David Eisenhower, gave an extraordinary speech to the American people on his departure, 3 days before he turned over the White House to John F. Kennedy. And what was interesting about this speech is that while at 1961, when American corporations were the envy of the world, making tons of money, and the American economy was ascendant, and the military was, of course, worshipped, defeated the Axis powers, lined up against the great Soviet threat, and all was well, Eisenhower chose to say these words before leaving the White House. Video, please. Obrigado.
My fellow Americans, this evening I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You have to realize this is one of the great presidents, great military leaders on his way out the door. And at the end of his second term, he says, by the way,
you can close the video.
Watch out for the military-industrial complex.
People know that he invented the phrase military-industrial complex, but very rarely do you.
Three months later, the new president, John F. Kennedy, gave one of the most important speeches any president has ever given. It was not particularly known at the time. It got very little attention. It would be 40 years before this speech came to prominence. And the reason it came to prominence is because many people made copies and put it on YouTube. Now, be clear, his speech is about the Soviet Union, relating to Cuba and the Bay of Pigs and so forth, but in general, the Soviet threat. However, if you listen carefully, you'll realize very quickly that he's talking about much more than that. Because you must understand, when Eisenhower made his speech, his closing farewell remarks 4 months earlier, he was aware of the extraterrestrial presence. When Kennedy made his speech to the publishers newspaper publishers on April 27th, he was aware of the extraterrestrial presence. But of course, his audience was not. And I wanted to show this video. And it is the key parts of his speech to the Newspaper Association editors regarding secrecy and its threat to the nation. It is profound. No president has ever given a speech like this, ever. And in my opinion, no president since him is able to give a speech like this. He was a man with his flaws, to be sure. But has anyone since been smarter, more vision, more ahead of his time, more wanting to make major change? He wanted to engage the arms race and end it. He wanted to achieve détente. He wanted to go to the moon. He wanted the ET information brought to his desk to address it and maybe bring it to the public. He wanted to get out of Vietnam. That's about the agenda of the last 5 presidents. But he didn't get to do that. If you have an opportunity, you can simply go on YouTube and you can search on Kennedy secrecy, and you'll find 20 or 30 versions of this speech. And I encourage you to listen to it. And you probably appreciate it as much as I, because he said this in '61, and all of the things he warned about, every single one has come true, has manifest in spades, maybe worse than he even imagined. Vision is not enough. You have to have the support of the people and engagement, action, and reform. Otherwise, all you're left with is vision and no outcomes. He did not get a chance to convert his vision into policy, and no one since has even dared to follow in his footsteps. The truth is that secrecy plus lies equals toxic poison. Toxic poison to the social contract. Secrecy in and of itself, dangerous, and to a great extent, possibly fatal. Lies, always dangerous, but not necessarily fatal. All of us have told some lies in our life to good cause, or to preserve ourselves, particularly, with regard to your spouses. But when you combine them, secrecy and lies, do that in a marriage, get a divorce lawyer. Do that in a nation, have a revolution. That's what's going on in the United States. The secrecy and lies have piled up to the point where the toxic poison, the toxic result, is approaching lethal levels. And you are literally seeing the body politic of the United States suffer gradual organ failure, kind of the throes of death that every human goes through. Ultimately, you always die, and everyone dies from the same thing: multiple organ failure. It happens to people, and it happens to body politics. So, let's see how I'm going to approach this. I'm as excited as you to find out. First, everything that we are talking about comes back to this. This is at the center of, I think, this entire conference and every other conference, but particularly this presentation, and of course its disclosure, which is defined there for you. People can interpret the term as they wish, but this is the definition of the advocacy movement. It's pretty simple: formal acknowledgement by the world's government of a non-human extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race. It'll be official for you when President Rohak comes forward and tells you that, official for the Russians when Putin tells them that, official for the Americans when Barack Obama tells them that. That's disclosure. It's an event. It could take 5 minutes or less. And it's the focus of the entire advocacy movement. And with respect to disclosure, you can divide all of history, going back to the Big Bang and going forward to the sun finally melting the earth in about 5 billion years, to two halves, the pre-disclosure world and the post-disclosure world. And in case you were wondering, you live on that little red line in the middle of the slide. Right? That's where we exist. The reason we're still on that red line and not in the post-disclosure world is the truth embargo. The truth embargo is the formal policy of the United States government with the cooperation of its allies and the de facto cooperation of other countries, generally in the sphere of influence of the United States, and unofficially with the cooperation of the People's Republic of China, the Soviet Union, and Russia, but not for the same reasons, to withhold the acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence, which has been the focus of several thousand conferences, thousands of books, hundreds of documentaries, yada, 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 for 67 years, all right, to withhold that acknowledgement from the people, which would be a lie, all right? I mean, it's government policy. There, it's a legal lie, but a lie that it is. And like all lies, particularly, it's bad enough when you just lie to your spouse about where you were on Thursday, and by the next Thursday, you've already had to tell 10 more lies to back that one up. Imagine lying about the nature of the galaxy to hundreds of millions of people. You've got to lie like crazy, day in and day out. You've got to come up with all manner of things in order to keep that one holding up. And they have for 67 years. The truth embargo. The end of the truth embargo will, of course, be disclosure. Now, as I've said many times, all political activism is a chess game between the activist community and a government, state, local, federal, one day galactic, I suppose. Hopefully it's a nonviolent chess game. The truth advocacy movement for ET disclosure has been generally a nonviolent chess game. The odd person has met their demise, yes, but not many. It's just a casual weekend in Chicago, about that many, if not less. So I'm grateful for that. But a chess game it is. And always in the beginning, the government has more pieces, more money, more power, more influence than the activists. And the activists spend years trying to gather pieces for the board, waiting for the government to lose a piece through this or that circumstance. And slowly, they take control of the center board. And eventually, they push the government into a corner and checkmate it. And when that happens, policy changes. Women get the right to vote. India sees the British depart. African Americans see the Civil Rights Act. Right? Gays give the right to marriage. And every country with a long history can think of a number of these things. But always, the government had to be checkmated before it happened. You just didn't put in a request, and they came back and said, what a wonderful idea. We're going to take care of that right away. Because every activist movement in all of history has always involved state authorities giving up a portion of their power. And in the old paradigm reality, going back to Summer, 7,000 years ago, giving up authority is not acceptable under that paradigm. It will be in the coming paradigm, because it has to be, all right? But not heretofore. And so the chess game continues. The point that I'll make tonight is that after 67 years of awareness and now 21 years of growing advocacy since the end of the Cold War, we are about to checkmate the United States government into getting what we want. On September the 22nd, Paradigm Research Group submitted a petition to the White House. Not just any petition, it was a petition to the White House's own program called We the People. Send us your petitions, get 5,000 signatures, and we'll give you a prize, namely a formal response from the White House. Populist democracy. The second petition submitted was this one, Disclosure Petition 1. We, the undersigned, strongly urge the President of the United States to formally acknowledge an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race, immediately release to the public domain all files from government or agency and military services related to the phenomena. This is the key issue, the key question. Disclosure Petition 1. Within 8 days, it had 5,000 signatures. Ultimately, it got 12,000 signatures. And thus, it earned a response from the White House. It's notable that 5 days after this petition achieved that 5,000 signature threshold, they raised the threshold to 25,000. On October the 4th, the response from the White House came. It is notable for 3 reasons, but first, the response. Rather amazing, actually. This is from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the White House Science Office, headed by Dr. John Holdren, and I can assure you Barack Obama reviewed every word before it was put on the White House website. The U.S. government has no evidence that any life exists outside our planet, 1, or that an extraterrestrial presence has engaged any member of the human race, 2. In addition, there is no credible information to suggest that any evidence is being hidden from the public eye. Yeah, I know. Contain yourself. Now, this formal response is notable for 3 reasons. 1, it is completely false. It's a lie. Not if you really didn't know it, but it's a lie. It's completely false. 2, and this is very important. It's a distinction not without a difference. It is indefensibly false. Now, for those who are married, I've never been, but I have married friends. You know the difference between telling your spouse, a defensible lie, right? When challenged, you have the goods. You can hold up, as opposed to an indefensible lie, whereas when challenged, you fold up like a card table, and then bad things happen. The third and most profound reason why this is remarkable is that it is the first time in the history of the phenomena that the executive branch of the United States government ever put its position on the extraterrestrial issue in writing. And there's a good reason for that. You don't want to put it in writing. So you can pretend you don't know, you have no opinion, you dodge and weave, don't bother me with this, why is this important, et cetera, et cetera. The moment you put it in writing, it is a fixed target to be attacked from all sides, shredded, and stuck back in your nose. So they haven't done it until October the 4th of 2011. That was PRG's first move in the final endgame that we're playing. By the way, because the petition received a response and got the necessary signatures, it remains on the White House website to this day, 2 years now, for anyone in the world to come and see and read. Now, having made that move, the next move the PRG did was logical. From October 4th, 2011 going forward, the game plan was shove as much evidence in front of the political press that the White House says doesn't exist until the political press finally go, these both can't be true. Somebody must be lying. If it's the White House, that's news. Let's cover it, or whatever. And so over the coming months, we submitted 4 more petitions. You can see them up there. Disclosure Petition 2. This is a website, by the way. 3, 4, and then 5 will come out soon. Oh, Obrigado. Thank you. Life is good. And these petitions were designed to point out key evidence. I'm not going to read them all to you, but they were obvious, pointing out key evidence. Now, remember, the threshold was 25,000 signatures now, and people were getting petition weary. PRG did not have the budget to do heavy marketing, so we didn't reach 25,000, and the petitions remained up for 30 days and then came down. No problem. All right? But nevertheless, that plus media appearances, articles in the paper, whatever, for that next 18 months, my focus was shoving that evidence out there. The White House says this doesn't exist, but yet here it is, right in front of your nose. It's funny how the White House has a bad tendency of late. It's perhaps not, maybe it's been as bad in the past, but it seems that one year the White House is telling you things exist when they don't exist, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And then the next year they're telling you things don't exist when they do exist. That would be extraterrestrials. You can see the problem here. And guess what? This trait is not confined to extraterrestrials and weapons of mass destruction. Now, again, I'm kind of speaking to you like you are an American audience who would instantly sense what I'm saying. But I am willing to speculate the Brazilian government, on occasion, has been mendacious about this or that and said things existed when they didn't and didn't exist when they did. It is a trait of all governments. So I don't want to totally pick on the U.S. And so it went for 18 months until the next planned move could take place. And that move was the citizen hearing. And the reason it took 18 months is because the money to put it on wasn't there. It didn't arrive until about 17 months after the White House response. A very polite Canadian, of course they're all polite, provided $1.1 million in a movie deal so we could put the event on and make a movie, which hopefully will pay it all back. And so we held the citizen hearing on disclosure. What was it? Well, here was the mission statement of it. The citizen hearing, this is the full name, by the way, right? I know that South America likes long names. Well, this is the full name of this event. The citizen hearing on disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence engaged in the human race will attempt to accomplish what the Congress has failed to do for 45 years, seek out the facts surrounding the most important issue of this or any other time. And the motto of this event was, if Congress will not do its job, the people will. What we did was bring 40 witnesses from 10 countries to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on F Street, 2 blocks from the White House and 14 blocks from the Congress on Capitol Hill. These witnesses testified for 5 days, 30 hours, in 20 sessions to 6 former members of Congress, whom you see here. Pretty representative of the American people. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 Libertarian, 3 men, 3 women. There were 2 assistants to the committee, Daniel Sheehan and Dr. Joseph Buckman. The witnesses, again, this is from the citizenhearing.org website, right? Included gentlemen like this, including one very distinguished gentleman in the second row, third from the left. Flew all the way up to Washington, D.C. The entire witness group was 40. You're seeing some here, more here. It was the largest assemblance of witness evidence on this subject ever in one place, ever at any time, going back to the flood. You can see here the committee taking the testimony, which was given under oath, a non-legal oath. And this hearing was designed to look as much like real congressional hearings, Senate and House, as possible. And many people thought they were real hearings that happened to watch it on the webcast, because we webcast it to the world. And to any members of Congress who didn't have the courage to come on down and see it in person, or any editor or reporter that was afraid to come down and they could watch it in the comfort and safety of their home, it was webcast. It was also filmed by two camera crews in high definition. This is another view of the citizen hearing on disclosure. And so, having completed that, the next move by PRG is intended to be the last move. There might be one more little move, but pretty much this is the last move before checkmate is achieved. And what is this? The Congressional Hearing Initiative, which will begin, I'm pretty confident now, on January the 8th of 2014. What's going on there? Well, hearings are very important in the United States. There have been many of great renown. There are countless hearings that go on, mostly routine business. There are hearing rooms in the Senate and the House buildings. Most, you don't hear about them, but some achieve global prominence. Some of the most famous, of course, include the Army MacArthur hearings of the 1950s, when Senator McCarthy tried to pull a stunt that a couple of other people have tried to pull in the last 10 or 15 years. Doesn't work, didn't work then. And let me tell you, these were big, enormous coverage, even though there were only 3 networks at the time, and black and white, but nevertheless seen all over the world. And then, of course, the Watergate hearings. Most of you know that. There is John Dean. Iran-Contra. That was a rather pageant moment there, a moment of pageantry. And then, of course, we have hearings for Supreme Court nominees, which in our country can get rather interesting. There's another one. This is, by the way, the Hart Senate Committee room. Recently, we had tobacco and health hearings, pretty important, and then now we're having a series of hearings on Benghazi. And the last time there was a hearing on the extraterrestrial issue, which polls showed that 50% of the world's people believe is real. 90% of the world's people believe there is definitely life somewhere in the universe. 50% believe it's already here. 85% believe their governments are lying. And about 5 to 7% say they're already having contact with extraterrestrials. When was the last time the Congress had a hearing on that? 1968. 45 years ago. And there's a very good reason for that, which I'll tell you in a moment. So what's about to happen is we're about to go back to the Hill. Now, this is a cartoon by Dennis Reno. That's a pretty good likeness of me. I'm not gonna shy away from it. But I love this one. He has me carrying a truth serum syringe towards the White House. And I have added the caption. Now, some of you may or may not have seen the movie Jaws, right? It's been around a long time. If you haven't seen it, Netflix. But that is a play on that quote from Jaws. We're going to need a bigger syringe. So I'm going back to the Capitol for the first time in 13 years. And what I mean by that, I visited it, but I haven't gone back as a lobbyist. I am a registered lobbyist in the House and Senate on this issue. I am the only registered lobbyist on this issue. Though it's been 16 years since I registered, and I thought maybe there might be a few others by now. But apparently the pay is not good enough for them, right? They can make millions lobbying for fracking companies or whatever. But I'm going back to Capitol Hill. I've had my wardrobe tailored. You see the results here. I'm going to dress not like Marina Del Rey, where I hang out now a little bit, but like a lobbyist. And I'm going to deal with the senators and Congress people up there in a highly public and organized way. And the reason that I'm doing this, there's actually 2 reasons that I'm actually going to do this, and there's 2 reasons why it's going to succeed. First and foremost, the reason why there have not been hearings since 1968 in the U.S. Congress is relative to what happened in the citizen hearing on disclosure. And what happened is that the 6 former members of Congress, with 80 years of tenure between them, 5 in the House, 1 in the Senate, came into the citizen hearing in a neutral frame of mind with minimal knowledge of the extraterrestrial issue and no particular bias one way or the other. And by the end of the week, they wanted to charge the Pentagon and demand the books, the files, help in whatever way they could. And one of the ways we'll talk about tonight. They were transformed. In fact, most of them were already on board by the afternoon of the first day. You've got to tell them a big truth. And it would help if it was a nonpartisan truth, so you don't get into the hyper-partisan blatherfest. Boy, that's not going to translate easily. That has marked the U.S. Congress of late. I have the biggest truth in history, and it's nonpartisan. And all you have to do is sit in your chair and listen to the witnesses. You don't even have to open your mouth. You don't have to proclaim your views. You don't have to confess your contact experiences. Just sit and listen to the witnesses. And watch how fast the praise and accolades pour in after the initial shock from all around the world. That's a powerful message. And while they may want to argue against it, they have no argument. And so, for that reason, and also by the cooperation of citizens, by the way, let me add a few more things. The DVD sets will be accompanied by a letter signed by most of the CHD witnesses and other witnesses asking for hearings and to meet with me. 2 or 3 weeks later, another letter will be sent to the committee chair people, signed by former members of Congress, specifically to the chairperson asking for hearings. Eventually, I will publish a list of all of those offices which have declined to meet, and I will go public in the usual fashion and request that everybody contact everybody on that list, every office on that list, politely and respectfully requesting that they reconsider. What I'm saying is that from January 8th to the end of February, we are going to do a full-fledged, broad-spectrum, international public blitz of the United States Congress demanding that they do the hearings that they haven't done for 45 years for military, agency, and political witnesses, the evidence of that testimony confirming the extraterrestrial presence. And I believe we're going to get it. If we get those hearings in March, the truth embargo will end sometime in April. The popular involvement will be orchestrated from a website called factsonwashington.org. This is the cover page. And we'll have information there, how to find your contact, your representative, and so forth. Whether you're American or living in Bangladesh, doesn't matter. And so that will be that move in the chess game. Now, before we continue, I have been told by the highly competent tech people here that the JFK video is ready to go. So let's double back. It's a good time to do this, right? You kind of know what we're up to. You kind of know where we're going. Now let's listen to what JFK said in 1961.
Gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as the people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Okay, thank you. Back to the slides. Did Lyndon Johnson hear this message? He did not. Did Richard Nixon hear this message? He did not. Bill Clinton, who worshiped Kennedy, heard the message, but he was blocked. Did George W. Bush hear this message? He did not. George H.W. Bush hear this message? He did not. Did Barack Obama hear this message? Maybe, but he didn't act on it. Did the political media hear this message? They did not. And in the 52 years since he made that message, you have seen the United States in decline, being slowly poisoned by lies and secrecy. And one of the reasons for those lies and secrecy and for the vast structures that were created to put them forward was the extraterrestrial presence, which the government denied, and though the American people then overlooked and didn't understand. They thought the Soviet Union was the only issue, and once it was resolved, we would move on. But it wasn't the only issue. There was another one even bigger than that, and that issue remains unresolved. And so the security state apparatus in the United States grows larger, not smaller. It is bigger than anything the Soviet Union even dreamed of. It is vast, and we cannot control it. The Congress can't deal with it. The president can't access it. And so we are in danger up there. Pray for us. Now, well, that also took me back to the beginning, but that's all right, because I have a very, very flexible thumb. I'm moving here. Here we go. Come on. Aha! Did that. Okay. Also going on is that the movie that is built somewhat around the citizen hearing on disclosure is continuing, and we hope to have it done. We have to raise another $250,000. We hope to have it done and out by April, which would coincide with other things. The website is truthandembargomovie.com. This is, there's a nice little banner. And this is the website, truthandembargomovie.com. That's more of the front page, and then this is the funding campaign that we have underway. Crowdfunding, some of you probably know about that. What else is going on? That brings us to the Citizen Hearing Foundation, which brings me to the key reason why I'm here. And so let's get into that. Citizen Hearing Foundation, what's going on with that? Okay, let's recall. Or let's not recall, but let me add. Remember, the Congress hasn't held a hearing since 1968. The UN last addressed this issue in 1978, when Edmund Gary was prompted by a number of individuals to bring the issue to the General Assembly for a resolution. Edmund Gary, being the prime minister of a rather small country, Grenada, we invaded them too. There's hardly anybody we haven't invaded at some point. He came, and with the assistance of people such as, starting on the left, astronaut Gordon Cooper. After him, on the left, is Dr. Jacques Vallée. And then two more down, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Then you have, of course, Prime Minister Edmund Gary. Then you have Kurt Waldheim, the Secretary General. Coming up the right side, Claude Boher, who is still involved in this issue, by the way. And then the rather young, youthful, bearded gentleman is Lee Spiegel, who is also involved in this issue to this day, writing a very important column for the Huffington Post. And they met in 1978. I don't know if this was Waldheim's, Gary's first or second visit. I do know that on his second visit to complete this resolution process, it just coincidentally happened that he was overthrown back in Grenada, and I don't think was able to return for some time. I'm sure the CIA had nothing to do with that. It was just one of those things. But there was no way that the UN was going to be allowed into this issue in 1978. So they set up a commission, and here is the actual document that was submitted to the UN. I would normally read it, but I don't have my computer. It was Resolution 33-426, 1978. And they did set up a commission which then did nothing, and it has done nothing since 1978. So that was the UN. Now, by midweek of the citizen hearing, around May 1, the former members of Congress were hot to go. They wanted to see some developments, and they seemed to think the UN was a target. So they wanted to approach the UN. So we got together, and Senator Mike Gravel wrote a communique, which was then reviewed by the other members. Some changes were made. And this is that communique, signed by 4 of the committee. 2 of the representatives had just retired from the House and were in what is called a 1-year quiet period, where they weren't allowed to do things like approach the UN and so forth. That quiet period ends on January the 3rd. And this communique called for Paradigm Research Group to set up a nonprofit organization to pursue a joint resolution to the General Assembly of the United Nations calling on or for a world conference, UN-backed world conference, on the evidence and the witnesses indicating an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And we decided, okay, we'll do that. And the foundation that we set up, well, actually the nonprofit is called the Citizen Hearing Foundation, and it is operating now. It is fully accredited and operating now. The website is citizenhearingfoundation.org. And this is the website here. And this is the mission statement, essentially. Well, actually, no, this is the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to raise money, hopefully $1 million, but $250,000 would be good. We can raise it from any human being, any organization in the world. If you're an American or if your country has reciprocal nonprofit status with the U.S., and there are some countries that do, these donations would be tax deductible, which really matters when you're talking about very large donations. And that money is going to be used to fund approaches within about a dozen countries to the executive branch, with the intention of the executive branch calling on their UN ambassador to exchange correspondence with the other countries involved to agree on a specific language for a single resolution to be submitted to the General Assembly, which, if it arrives with 5, 6, 7 sponsors, including nations of substantial development size, has a very good chance of passing. That is the UN Resolution Initiative. That is the mission statement. We have sponsors. We're hoping to get more sponsors, corporate, whatever, that want the truth out. Add those. And I seem to have missed a page, but we have a board of advisors. Currently, there are 2, Senator Mike Gravel and Attorney Daniel Sheehan. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to add about 10 to 12 more advisors. A.J. Gavard will almost certainly be one of them. Many of these advisors will be researchers in certain countries, and they will be the leader in approaching the executive within their country, and we will provide funding to them to do this. We will open up an office near the UN. Now, the countries that we are targeting initially, the majority of them are in South America and Central America, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, Brazil, also Portugal, possibly Canada, San Marino, because even the little countries deserve to be part of this. And we'll see what happens. Who knows? We might get a response from many countries that will proactively want to engage this. But these are the initial countries that we will set up, I guess you could say, in-country operations to approach the executive offices. So where is all this leading? Assuming we survive this next 10 to 15 years. And what I mean by survive is not that everyone goes down the drain, but most of the world's population goes into great suffering while the few elite, I assume, move into space to live there. I encourage you to go and watch the movie Elysium with Brad Pitt. It is classic, great science fiction, and it is a superb political statement. Elysium, I don't know if it's still in the movies, Netflix. Watch it. Some of it was filmed in your country. But I can only say that while some may do well, it's going to go badly for your kids and grandkids. We're right at the edge of the limits of human imagination under the old paradigm thinking. We either change the paradigm, alter our worldview, or the same people are going to take us to the same place they've been taking us for the last 7,000 years. And that place always involves a war between somebody. War after war after war, endless war. And in the United States, that's very real. Down here, not so real. Let us count all the times over the last 45 years that a South American country went to war with another South American country. How many times has that happened? I don't think it's happened even once. Though a country did go to war against Argentina. That was, I'll count that one sort of, but not in South America. That was up there. So there's a whole lot of peace down here. There's some rebels and some guerrillas, I understand that, but that's trivial compared to what we consider war where I come from, right? And so we have a decision to make. Europe has been making some progress. The United States has not. The Middle East is not. The Balkans is not. And to some degree, parts of Asia. And the message they need to hear, among so many other things, is that consider being more like South America for a couple of decades and see how that goes for you. Might work out pretty well. So you can kind of see the dynamic here. If we can, oh, and then I'll close with this. Having said that, there's no question that in order for disclosure to take place and for a post-disclosure world to evolve, that will serve all nations and all peoples, and not just the elite and their unbridled, limitless greed, a lot of people in this paradigm are going to have to provide the truth. They're going to have to reconcile with their people, and if they do, they will achieve redemption. And once redeemed, they can and will participate in the restructuring of the human societies in the 21st century in a way that will allow us to thrive. And if that happens, I suspect that we will end up where ultimately we should end up, and that is on the other side of disclosure, on the other side of contact itself, not covert contact in the middle of the night, followed by several table procedures that you would rather not have to do, for whatever reason, and that's a complex question and I'm not going to get into here, but open contact, meaning you turn on CNN or you turn on the local news and it's Jaime Maussan interviewing a gray on Mexican television. That's open contact. On the other side of that, maybe that. In your lifetime, not your kids or your grandkids, in your lifetime. But the only way to there is through disclosure. And in order to get disclosure, we have to force checkmate on a government, at least. And in order to do that, I need the support of every person out there that wants the truth. If you want to know about the extraterrestrials, I need your emails, I need your tweets, support in every way possible over the next 3 months. Let's get it done. And once it's done, it can never be undone, no matter what terrible things come our way. From that day forward, we will be in the post-disclosure world. And more importantly, we will be able to watch every aspect of its evolvement, the reform and restructuring of human societies on our LED, ultra-high-resolution televisions, on email to our iPhones, on the World Wide Web in every manner and fashion. We will watch it every single day. Now that is some real good times, which I'm looking forward to with you, and hopefully again, I'll see you in Brazil. Thank you.
La historia que le presento aquí podría ser el argumento perfecto de una película. Imagine usted a un grupo de extraterrestres que llegan a la Tierra, a diferentes lugares, para establecer contacto con los seres humanos. Una relación más o menos abierta, que deciden acercarse a diplomáticos, académicos de las universidades, a periodistas, para convencerlos de que sus intenciones son buenas. La historia evoluciona, algunos de los seres humanos son llevados a las bases de los extraterrestres, algunos otros son llevados a las naves, y así durante algunas décadas se desarrolla y crece esta relación. Y entonces los extraterrestres deciden que tienen que partir, dado que el proyecto fracasó, que los seres humanos no pudimos comprender la importancia, no supimos de alguna manera apreciar su presencia aquí en la Tierra, no pudimos cambiar espiritualmente y por tanto y por otros problemas tienen que irse. ¿Qué diría usted si esa historia fuese real? Que existen testigos, que más de 100 personas en Italia al menos hoy han salido al frente para declarar que lo que ocurrió entre 1956 y 78 fue verdad. El caso se llama amicizia o amistad o friendship. Y aquí le voy a presentar los detalles de esta investigación realizada por un equipo italiano de investigación encabezado por Pier Giorgio Caria. Yo espero que le guste, porque recuerde, esta historia es auténtica.
Newspapers talked about it. People wanted to know. But nobody could penetrate the mystery. What was going on? Strange flying machines were plowing the skies of Italy. It was the 50s. Some people took incredible photos. Others were frightened and shouted, "They're here, they're among us," while still others believed the aliens had come to help. But who were they? Where were they from? Above all, what did they want? Many knew but kept quiet. A mystery that has remained as such for decades. A secret now revealed. Friendship. The incredible story of mass contact between humans and extraterrestrials. Until recently, the phenomenon of contactism, or the deliberate encounter repeated over time between men and evolved extraterrestrial entities, was believed to involve only a few chosen individuals or contactees. Many of them went down in history. George Adamski, Howard Menger, Eugenio Siragusa, just to name a few. All of them faithfully abided by this cliché. But in 2007, something happened that would change the cards on the table. Stefano Breccia, an engineer from Marche living in Abruzzo, published some startling papers that seemed to reveal the story of repeated direct encounters between more than 100 people and extraterrestrial beings living in numerous secret bases on our planet. The main figure of the event told by Breccia is the writer Bruno Sammachicha. The case is said to have taken place mainly in and around Pescara. It would all begin in 1956 and would last for many years. The film clips and photographs that have emerged so far are of considerable interest, but even more extraordinary are the testimonies of the individuals involved. Everyone called this story friendship, and that is the name that has come down to us today. Thanks to Stefano Breccia's courage, one of the most awe-inspiring sagas in ufology has come to light. It wasn't an easy decision to decide to make it known.
It all started from an idea by Bruno Sammachicha. He'd been thinking about writing down his experiences and then asked me to be the one to do it, and so I was at his house for a month to record his stories. Then I put everything together.
Besides granting his dear friend's wishes, Breccia had set himself another objective.
One reason is to hope that it might work as bait to encourage other people in the group to come forward.
Gaspare de Lama and his wife Mirella are among those still alive today who were involved in the friendship events and who accepted Breccia's invitation to come forward. They now live on the shores of Lake Como. Gaspare admired Stefano's courage to expose himself so directly, despite being a well-known figure in science and academia.
He had no hesitation about exposing himself, and I admired him for that. And so coming out and talking about my experience becomes easy for me, because it gives me great joy. The joy of being able to tell people something that can help them understand more, or make their doubts grow or disappear, or strengthen their belief.
Gaspare de Lama became a fan of ufology in the late 40s and, together with his wife, sought a path to greater awareness. Even Gaspare's mother took part in the events.
Gaspare, his mother Zita, and I had finally achieved our goal, which was to get to know them. We were hoping for an experience with teachers who could help us improve.
In the friendship story, Samachicha called the beings by the name of W56. They weren't a single race, but a group of extraterrestrial beings coming from different parts of the universe. Although they looked like humans, there were considerable differences in height, which ranged from 1 to 6 meters. The first encounter took place in April 1956. Bruno Samachicha was there, along with his two friends, Giancarlo and Giulio.
Bruno said that an old friend had given him this parchment because Bruno collected antiques, and while looking at it, they noticed it was a map of the castle above Ascoli Piceno at Roccapiglia. It seemed to be a kind of treasure map, so they decided to go and take a look at the area. They went there more than once without ever finding anything in particular, until one night when they came across these people. At a certain point, these two came out from a path that runs around the castle, introduced themselves and started to talk. One of them was particularly short, about 1 meter in height, and the other extremely tall, 2.5 meters, something like that. As for the rest, they looked like normal people.
But what happened in that encounter? According to the eyewitnesses, the two aliens spoke perfect Italian. The thing that immediately struck them was the strong sense of love that emanated from these beings. The information they gave to Bruno, Giancarlo, and Giulio was awesome, to say the least. They said that Earth had been created for a positive purpose, and that man was turning everything into evil. That the morality level of humans was much lower than their own. They explained that this is a very critical moment in human history. Atomic weapons are capable of destroying the planet in a matter of minutes, a tremendous risk that could come to pass because of our low moral sense. Their task was to ensure that the situation didn't get out of hand. They said they weren't here to conquer, as there was nothing to conquer. That everything stemmed from the need for love and respect, and that everything should be done in accordance. They knew Earth's history, philosophies, and religions perfectly. They said they'd already been on Earth for many centuries, living at secret bases in various places on the planet. They preferred not to reveal themselves publicly because people weren't ready for the contact. They expected a positive return from their activity. Their goodness and their truth would be stronger than human doubts. When they left, it was almost 3 in the morning. The extraordinary experience of friendship began at that very moment. The meetings between Bruno, Giancarlo, Giulio and the W56, also known as the Friends, continued for several months. During frequent long walks on the beach in Pescara, they gave the humans a good deal of other information. Dimpietro was the name of the captain of the extraterrestrial group operating in Italy. Sigir, Sigis, Itao, Kenio, Sinas, Saju, Meradir, Romulus are some of the names that became common within friendship. They were invented by the humans because the W56 had a different concept for names. One of the most impressive facts regarded their bases. They said they had a number of them scattered around Italy and the world. Their most important European base was right in Italy, and one of the entrances was in fact at Rocopia.
The main one was the enormous base at the depths of the Adriatic, almost in contact with the continental shelf, which roughly ranged from Ortona to Rimini as the expanse of its longitude, and in latitude went from the middle of the Adriatic to the Apennines, with an upper limit of 300 meters, so vast that it was affected by normal weather, so at times it also rained inside. Then they had many smaller bases, closer to the surface. There was one in Pineto, one in Ascoli, 3 around Pescara, one near Como, one in the Milan area, and so on. Many of them were genuine centers of support.
But the aliens also explained how they built their bases. In the stories told by Bruno, Giancarlo and Giulio, you're immediately aware of the huge gap in scientific and technological development between humans and the Friends.
They weren't built by digging, but through a particular mechanism. They were able to compress material laterally. The soil would thicken into what would later become the walls of the base, and then the outer structure was formed by extremely dense and therefore extremely strong material. The funny thing was that it was very unstable, but it always had to be kept standing. All you had to do was flip a switch and everything returned to the initial state. So, for them to open and close a base was a very commonplace operation.
The same system was used to create the entry corridors.
Even the bases closer to the surface didn't have stable entrances. When they had to enter, they opened a corridor and then closed it again.
Aside from the facts related to friendship, the presence of secret extraterrestrial bases on our planet is a subject that scholars have long been aware of. Just as there have been numerous cases of contact throughout the world, like the one the American policeman named Herbert Schirmer described, which occurred in Ashland, Nebraska on December the 3rd, 1967.
The experience took place in the United States to the policeman Schirmer, who had a close encounter of the third kind with UFO entities and was allowed on board one of these UFOs. In the course of this encounter with these beings, they told him several things. He would be told that the pilots of UFOs on Earth have different bases of support, and they are both underground and below the seas.
In the case of friendship, Bruno Sammachichia was the leader, the main reference point.
The story of the W-56 had started with him. He knew the most since he'd been in the bases, had met them personally, was telepathic, was the one who held the strings, the one who decided. Not that he was, I'm the boss. The word boss isn't nice, but we saw him as number one.
The relationship that was established between the W-56 and the friendship group was not one way. Very soon, the friends started asking for help.
At the most prosaic level, they asked for essentially logistical assistance. Then they requested industrial quantities of fruit. Then they needed metals in industrial quantities as usual, but also strange minerals like strontium and barium nitrate, which were very difficult to find since back then they served no useful purpose at all. Today it has applications in telecameras, circuits like that, but in those days we had absolutely no idea what it might be used for.
To unload the cargo from the trucks, including fruit, the W-56 used teleporting.
They proved they could teleport anything, even people, without any particular problem. They took the whole load of fruit and teleported it, which means that the operation only lasted a few seconds.
Of course, all this meant that no outsider could watch the unloading. This often forced Bruno and Giancarlo to invent excuses so the truck drivers arriving with a load wouldn't become suspicious. They usually explained that a team of professional workers would be coming soon to transfer the goods by other means. So, while Bruno invited the driver to some nearby bar to wait for the phantom workers, Giancarlo stood watch over the truck. Obviously, the places where they met were chosen in advance. The unloading operation lasted just a few seconds, so when Bruno and the truck driver came back, it was already over. The truck driver was always impressed by the speed and cleanliness of the work. Buying such large quantities and so many varieties of materials was very expensive. Sometimes it was the friends who paid part of the cost, or all of it, maybe in their usual way. But most of the time it wasn't like that, which created more than a few problems.
Essentially, the vast majority of the expenses were paid by Bruno. In other words, he took the trouble of paying, the others took part if and when they could.
Throughout this story, definitely out of the ordinary, it seems even more absurd that despite their astonishing technological capabilities, the W-56 needed help to get food or other materials. Not to mention the money that materialized out of nowhere.
Of course, they could get whatever they wanted without the slightest problem. As I said, their technology was advanced. In my opinion, putting on this little show served to keep the sense of cohesion tight.
In fact, the friends explained that to be able to operate among us, humans had to express their goodwill in a concrete way too. They said, help us to help you. Lots of people who were part of the friendship story saw W-56 flying saucers. These sightings were almost always by appointment. The W-56 indicated the place, date and time, so the humans were able to get organized with film equipment. Sometimes the photos were also published. The series of a flying saucer over Milan, photographed by Gaspare da Lama, ended up in Domenica del Corriere in the second issue of April 1962. The sighting had taken place at the end of February of the same year. The eyewitnesses were Gaspare da Lama, Bruno Samaciccia and journalist Bruno Gibaudi, at the time author of numerous articles on UFOs. and one of the first journalists to seriously address the issue.
When we were on my balcony in Piazza Giulio Cesare in Milan, when that saucer was photographed, that's why he later wrote the article in the Domenica del Corriere. Besides Bruno, he was present too.
Obviously, only now, after the revelations of Professor Breccia and Gaspare de Lama, can we know what really revolved around that seemingly chance occurrence. But how much weight should we give to these claims? Gaspare still remembers one of the sightings perfectly. It happened in the countryside of Treno near Milan. There are still excellent quality photos and a film clip, more deteriorated because of the decades that have passed. The W56 asked Gaspare himself to choose the place.
I went back to Bruno and said, that's the place I chose. And then he told me, go buy some film, put it in the camera. And I said, but no, you put it in. No, you have to do everything. I said, okay. I put the film in the camera and filmed for a good 2 minutes. He wanted me to take the film out of the camera. I put it in my pocket and took it to Faragna, which was then in Via Mattiotti, to have it developed. When I went to get it, I took it home and saw the film clip of this beautiful flying saucer that was going up and down almost to the ground.
On top of the saucer, you see a dark area, which the W56 explained was a particular effect of condensation caused by the energy of the flying saucer. Some of the photos of the series taken in the Treno countryside were lost, but those that remain would provide evidence of the incredible sighting experienced by Gaspare de Lama and Bruno Samaciccia. While returning to Milan, the saucer followed them for a stretch, and Samaciccia took one more shot, the last of the 12 exposures on the roll.
Bruno took a photo of the same flying saucer, which had apparently reappeared there to follow us or to give us a last farewell.
The particular phenomenon of condensation does not appear in this shot. This important series of documents was analyzed to evaluate any possible falsification. Back then, digital technologies didn't exist, so it was very difficult to produce high-quality forgeries.
I accurately and specifically analyzed the photographic material concerning the friendship case. I didn't find any evidence of forgery, such as a small-scale model suspended by cables, superimposed images, processing with 3D graphics.
From the images of the analyses that were made, I can confirm that the object was quite large. We're talking roughly 4 to 5 meters around, and this also agrees with the testimonies of the people I spoke with, and the object is precisely inserted into this context of lights, shadows. Therefore, it is perfectly placed in its environmental context.
As part of the friendship case, an enormous amount of photographic material and film clips about flying saucers was produced. Much has been distributed indiscriminately, much has been lost, and even stolen, and much more is still locked in the drawers of other unknown participants who don't want to make themselves known. However, there's enough material available to give us an idea of just how incredible the events would have been. All the material that is known to date is thanks to Gaspare de Lama and Stefano Breccia.
In the friendship case, there were literally hundreds of photos, videos, audio recordings, and that's about it, since technology ended there at the time.
Over time, friendship would involve other people who took part in this incredible experience in various ways. Everybody had the opportunity to see the phenomena, and many had the chance to personally meet the W56. the number and kinds of individuals involved in Italy alone would be considerable.
I have a file where there are the names of, I think, 120 people who were involved in this story in some way. Those are the people I'm aware of, but who knows how many others there are that I don't know about. The people involved in friendship came from all walks of life. There was a cross-section of normal society. Friendship was also active in other countries, in France, Switzerland, Germany, particularly in Germany, but also in Siberia, in Argentina, and who knows how many other places. In Australia.
As we've seen, teleportation was one of the most impressive technological capabilities the Friends had. This system was used to materialize and dematerialize objects of various sorts, and even slips of paper with the written answers to questions asked by those who were present at the meetings.
Their technology is infinite. There were so many things I saw. The ones I remember the most were the teleports. Their film reels, or even, sometimes, written notes or film clips of flying saucers that we would then watch just came from above. They materialized in mid-air in the room. Sometimes they came from the floor and tapped me under the chair. Sometimes I saw them materialize in the air.
Along with teleportation, some of the most frequent phenomena were communications between the Friends and the humans through normal radios. This was also done their way.
Their technology was virtually indistinguishable from magic. For example, if I took two identical radios tuned into the same frequency and put them side by side awaiting their message could be heard on one radio while the other radio continued its normal broadcast as if nothing was happening. So there was obviously insane amounts of energy involved and directivity just as crazy.
So I bought myself one of those transistor radios. Bruno told me to put it there on the cabinet. In 5 minutes, they'll prepare it for you. In fact, after 5 minutes, there was a big crack. A sort of greenish flame came out, and Bruno said, "There, now it's ready." And they immediately greeted me through the radio. CG, and I could also change the frequencies. The broadcast continued.
Some of these communications were also recorded with the reel-to-reel devices existing then. Gaspare still owns some of the tapes. For the first time after so many years, the voice of the W-56 is made public.
Cari amici, cari figlioli, siate certi di noi, poiché nessuno tra noi vacillerà. Voi siate uniti, uniti, uniti e sopportate le vostre debolezze reciproche, lottando e migliorando come uomini e come nostri cari amici. Il nostro mondo per voi cari non è facile a capirsi. Questo è naturale, ma con l'affetto e la fiducia potrete ugualmente stare vicino ai nostri cuori aperti a voi e comprenderci di più. Un abbraccio fatto di caldo affetto e di pura amicizia dal vostro Sigir.
Radios weren't the only communication tools used. Sometimes the Friends would also insert themselves into normal television programs.
I remember once there was a film, and it was interrupted and their saucers were seen flying, while in the background their voices, maybe only greeting us that time.
A fourth witness of the extraordinary events of friendship who accepted Breccia's invitation to speak is the professor of design Paolo Di Girolamo. His experience was very brief. He met the friendship group only a couple of times. Always a ufology enthusiast, Di Girolamo knew Consul Alberto Perego and journalist Bruno Ghibaldi personally, and it was precisely the latter to put him in touch with Bruno Samaciccia in Pescara. Paolo had with him a letter he'd written for the W56.
And he welcomed me into a kind of living room, so to speak. I enter, I lay this letter on the console, and I sit down on the sofa. At one point, Bruno Samaciccia says, "We should be getting some news, let's see." He takes this radio and turns it on. The radio was playing music, and then we hear a piercing whistle. Really a very loud hissing sound. I hear Sigir here. Hello, Paolo. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. 3 times. Then another voice says, "Let's get the goods." Now, the goods, in my opinion, had to be a big parcel Samaciccia had taken, all lined in black and placed on top of the television set. A very loud crackle, a real blinding purple flash, just like that, and then there was nothing.
After this event, which leaves Paolo speechless, the group goes out into the street. And when they come back inside, Paolo realizes that his letter, which he'd left on the table, was gone. For a moment, they talk about who might have taken it, but nobody understands. Samaciccia's wife also denies touching it. At that point, Bruno urges everyone to go out into the street again.
There wasn't a soul in sight at all. Around midnight, or something like that. At a certain point, I feel something falls on my head. A little piece of paper all folded up. It was a scorched envelope. Open, and it was the letter I'd left on the console.
To make the phenomena possible, or to amplify them, including telepathy, which they made wide use of, the W56 used devices that were called nuclei. They could be placed in objects, in rooms, or even in the bodies of living creatures, including people.
Questi nuclei erano per loro
These nuclei were a necessary thing for them. Like if I want to receive a phone call from you, I need to have a phone at my house.
Bruno had a German shepherd named Dick. The friends told Bruno that the dog would play an important role in the contacts and in certain operations that called for the help of the humans. He would become a sort of amplifying antenna. So they asked Samaciccia to bring the dog to the seaside. And at their command, which came by telepathy, Dick was made to go into the water. At that point, the friends would treat the dog, placing nuclei under his paws. In fact, Dick was almost always with Bruno. In one of the film clips that have come to light, we see him looking out of the window while Bruno is filming a UFO circling over the palazzos of Milan, where Bruno lived for a while. It isn't the only ufological document made in Milan. One of the more controversial pieces of information that the W56 gave to their human friends concerned a conflict with an artificial race called Weros, but which Samaciccia renamed with the term CTR, which was the contraction of the word contraries.
One of the strange things about the friendship stories is the existence of enemies, the famous contraries, the CTR. While the W56 were ethical, these others were materialistic, virtually the opposite of the W56 in every way. They didn't speak of war, but of conflict, and said one reason they were here was to keep the CTR in check.
The Friends called them science worshippers, saying the CTR were creatures without scruples. And their greatest fear was that we humans were following the same path the CTR had already covered. For the W56, the feelings of friendship, affection, love and harmony that they were creating between themselves and the human group, just as it is among human beings, were not just defining the quality of relationships.
For them, cohesion, friendship, loyalty, and things like that are not abstract concepts, but rather a living entity that they call Ureda. This living entity is fostered precisely by the sense of loyalty and was contrasted by an alter ego that was called Reda, which was essentially the opposite.
E a loro questa energia serviva come
And for them, this energy served as a sort of fuel, let's say, a driving force for some of their means of defense, or anyway for their tools.
The defense instruments Gaspare talks about, the Friends explained, were also important for the conflict they had with the CTR. They explained that friendship, which Ureda originated from, was so important that if the group hadn't kept the harmony high, or if the group was even dismembered, they themselves would have fallen victims of the CTR, who might well have destroyed their bases. But this wasn't the only reason to be friends. The W56 said that love, in its most unselfish sense, as well as ethics, respect, and altruism, should guide every thought and every action. They said these values were essential to ensure a safe and healthy evolutionary progress. A lesson that humanity had to put into practice if it wanted to avoid the risk of terrible self-destruction. The mere thought of doing harm was inconceivable to the W56, and the sense of ethics, morality, pervaded their every action, their every gesture, their every thought. Even their technology, their machines, were consciously impregnated with it. A concept that for us is unimaginable.
They said they were incapable of causing harm to anyone. They said that even their very devices would refuse to harm anyone. Ethics permeated everything about them, to the point that they would refuse. Indeed, they said that if they weren't able to avoid harming someone, then in that case they would self-destruct.
It wasn't by chance that the journalist Bruno Ghibaldi was with De Lama and Sammachicha during the sighting published by Domenica del Corriere. Ghibaldi was extremely involved in friendship and experienced everything there was to be tried, including the personal encounters with the W56. Stefano Breccia also knew him. He remembers very well how he joined the group.
At the time, Ghibaldi had a program on television about making model aircraft. Giancarlo had seen it by chance, and he liked this person. He asked for Bruno's permission, and Bruno agreed. As a result, Ghibaldi was brought to Milan to meet Bruno, and starting from then also became a part of the circle.
The presence of the journalist was important because he could indirectly publicize a lot of the information that was given by the Friends.
He was a journalist who could help the case by writing about it, while we didn't have any connections like this. He had acquaintances in the field of journalism and television that we didn't have.
The pictures that Ghibaldi took of a UFO over Monte Mario in Rome attracted the attention of Cesare Zavattini. The famous filmmaker interviewed him and put the piece in a documentary film entitled The Mysteries of Rome. The words of Ghibaudi emphasized what the W-56 had said was one of their main tasks on our planet. The control of the nuclear armaments belonging to the superpowers, in the fear that man might make the terrible choice of using them, unleashing a total war. In fact, this is one of the key themes of the entire story of worldwide contactism. Adamski, Siragusa, Menja, and many other contactees received the same kind of message from extraterrestrials. And the W-56 actually intervened with their UFOs and their technology, but with previously trained terrestrial operators to stop a situation that seemed it might lead to something irreparable. The incident occurred in 1967.
So an operation managed by human beings was launched, which was designed to disable all nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union and in the United States in the face of a situation that seemed risky, that might degenerate from one minute to the next. There are books written by officers of the US Air Force, by now retired, which tell the story of how their battery of Minuteman missiles had been rendered inactive by flying saucers revolved in the area.
One of the books referred to by engineer Breccia was written by Robert Salas and James Klotz. It contains military documents obtained through the law on the Freedom of Information, the so-called Freedom of Information Act. But there are other clues about the interest these beings had in nuclear weapons. The atomic tests have always been filmed and photographed with special equipment, with technologies that can capture the very first moments of the thermonuclear explosion. In these pictures, we see the explosion in the first few microseconds, when the terrible mushroom cloud hasn't yet formed. In the third snapshot, we note the presence of an Adamskian flying saucer a few meters from the explosion. If authentic, this photo would give us an idea of the incredible technological capabilities of these creatures. Another extremely important person in the history of Italian ufology was Consul Alberto Perego, who wrote as many as 4 books between the 60s and 70s analyzing the world scene and pointing out policy choices made by governments that would have been affected by the overt or covert activities of this sort of alien aviation. Many exceptionally clear photos of UFOs appeared in these volumes. Some of them were even identified as being the inside of a cockpit of a flying saucer. Perego cited the dates and locations of the sightings, but never mentioned the name of the authors of the photos. The places were almost always the classic zones where the W-56 and the Friendship Group were active. Milan, Pescara, Francavilla, Montesilvano. And in fact, the photos were made precisely by the people who were part of Friendship. But we've only learned this today. For Gaspare da Lama, Alberto Perego was of paramount importance. Perego introduced him to the comprehension of the profound implications of the UFO phenomenon and contactism at a time when it was extremely difficult to find material about these issues in Italian.
And then he told me how things were according to him. Naturally, I reeled a bit of the chair because I didn't expect it. He really knew. I mean, he'd understood a lot. He'd understood. A man of great valor, an idealist, a pure man. He, too, was amazing, very cultured.
Perego also announced to Gaspare that he intended to publish a book where he would reveal everything he knew about the presence in our midst of beings from other worlds, a proposal that never materialized, however. Among the correspondence that Gaspare has kept are letters written by Consul Perego himself. In one of these, among other things, he talks about his intention to publish the book, I'll Tell All. Other statements made in this excerpt of the letter are also very interesting.
Dear, I imagine you've guessed my bitter experience of recent years. For the revelation of the new reality, I'd bet on 2 men who have disappeared from the scene, John 23 and Kennedy. As is well known, Kennedy died 5 days before my report went into circulation. As you've seen, everyone keeps quiet or pretends not to know. In 1965, I hope to publish I'll Tell All, but I believe I've already said a good deal. I'm sending you with best wishes, the most affectionate remembrance, Alberto Perego.
But the alleged tasks of these creatures would have been others as well. Another purpose of the presence of the W56 was to help our evolutionary process, to push us to a higher level of understanding. That's why they had been on our planet for a very long time, and even shared with us some of our suffering in the matter. They also revealed that their real name was Acri. Stefano Breccia has done research on this name, discovering some very interesting aspects.
The word Akri is a plural noun in Sanskrit that means the sages. At that point, I tried to see it in Egyptian, and I discovered that there are two very similar words. The first term, Akriu, is the name of these divinities, which usually means the wise people. Then it occurred to me to inquire into other languages. I discovered that in classical Greek, Akri means Akeo, or people in high places. In classical Arabic, Akri means group of friends, or something like that. As a proper noun, the word is fairly common, fairly widespread.
But this wouldn't be the only trace. Years ago, Count Richard Cianfrè gave the Italian contactee Eugenio Siragusa a strange handwritten letter from Voltaire. It was addressed to the legendary Count of Saint-Germain. The text contains enlightening phrases that would fit perfectly into the context of an alleged alien presence in human history.
6th of June, 1761. I am answering your letter of April, Lord, in which the appalling revelations make the old man that I have become the confidant to your most terrible secrets, the day of his death. Thank you, Germaine. Your long road through time will be illuminated by my friendship for you. Even at the time of your revelations about the middle of the 20th century, because of time, the talking pictures will not be able to be stored in memory. May your wonderful flying machines bring you back to me. Farewell, my friend. Voltaire, Gentleman of the King.
What were the talking pictures that Voltaire refers to? And your wonderful flying machines? What had Voltaire seen? Who was the legendary Count of Saint-Germain really? The epilogue of friendship arrived at the end of the 70s because, unfortunately, the people who revolved around Samachicha failed to deliver on the expectations of the cosmic friends. The group gradually and irreversibly fell apart. The Ureda disappeared and the fears of the W56 seemed to come true. This dramatic moment coincided with the phenomena of the Adriatic, the great wave of sightings that occurred between October 78 and January 79.
Officially, the story ended when the CTR managed to get the better. The story is quite difficult to believe from many perspectives. According to me, the adventure of 78 was the surprise ending. I mean, these people were probably fed up with Samachicha and company and decided to bow out in a spectacular way. In my opinion, it continued to go on, and I have good evidence of this fact in Italy as well as abroad.
Even if the entire story of friendship seems like an incredible science fiction tale rather than an incident that really happened, Despite the great controversy about its authenticity, given what has emerged so far, it's difficult to maintain that it had all been an invention.
Believe it, don't believe it. In any case, we can't help but take into consideration the testimonies of the protagonists and the material that refers to these testimonies.
According to eyewitnesses, the sightings, the teleporting, and all the other impressive phenomena that appeared were not, however, the real reason these beings were on Earth. The Friends defined themselves as the precursors of the spirit world. In the end, the real essence, the soul of this relationship, which unfortunately ended up badly because of human shortcomings, is the immense example of love, dedication, and respect that they impressed in the heart of the eyewitnesses still living.
L'insegnamento più bello che ho avuto tra di loro.
The most valuable teachings that I received from among them is this momentum they gave us, and this endeavor, perhaps gone amiss, that they've made to love each other truly, to be close-knit, and to be united. They enriched me. They put me into contact with an almost impossible world full of love.
It was also an exciting experience. Very exciting and magnificent. The feeling that the W56 transmitted was one of great friendship and love.
There would be much more to say about friendship. Before leaving, the Friends promised to come back and created a bond with the few remaining humans with an oath of mutual fidelity. Even today, these people believe that there are indeed special friends that could help us, or who, in all probability, have never stopped doing so.
Recuerde que esta es una historia verdadera. Recuerde que ocurrió y recuerde que estos seres anunciaron que algún día volverían, que esta aventura no habría terminado y que cualquier día estarían aquí. Podríamos considerar que ya está ocurriendo en algún lugar del mundo, que existe un nuevo proyecto amistad, un proyecto amicizia, un proyecto friendship. ¿Estará sucediendo? Quizá muy pronto lo sabremos. Soy Jaime Maussan y estas son las investigaciones especiales de tercermilenio.tv.